back. Okay. So you got your Bibles open to Jonah. So I was handed a little ad here in the local newspaper. This was from July 10th. And First Plymouth Church here in Lincoln, offering a class. This is the class, Spiritually Fluid, Multi-Faith and More, presented by Dr. Lee Rediger of Doane University. It's becoming more common for people to participate in aspects of more than one faith. So what does this look like in practice? For those who practice more than one religion, what about this way of life is appealing and especially challenging? So in Lutheran speak, we call this syncretism. And so you practice more than one religion. And Lutherans have been anti-syncretism in this country since the 1800s. So this is not new. If you saw this in the newspaper and it in any way either got you curious or alarmed or anything like that, this is not new. They just have a new term for it because this sounds more like a woke thing to say, frankly. I'm spiritually fluid, you know. And if you were to say, well, I'm a syncretist, first of all, you probably wouldn't see yourself as a syncretist, and two, nobody would know what you meant, including you. So it's just a new term for a very old thing, but it's something that you find in the scriptures. So if you were to look at the Old Testament, for example, what do the prophets often rail against when they're talking to the people of Israel? What do they preach against? False gods. So does that mean that the people were worshiping Canaanite deities and not worshiping Yahweh? No, it means that they were worshiping Yahweh and it was multiple practices in multiple faiths at the same time. And so this is an ancient thing. It's not new. Although it says I had to sign up for this class before they started. I guess they wanted to vet you. So you can't just show up on the Zoom meeting and like heckle people. But I so bad want to at this time. So this kind of syncretism is not new. It's very ancient. And I wonder, the other reason I would have wanted to join the class, it's in the evenings. The other reason I would have wanted to join the class is because I would have been curious to see if they present this as new. But it's not new. It's all over the Old Testament even. So, you know, I don't know. People they do the same things, they just call it something different, you know. I'm spiritually fluid. I'm not spiritually fluid. Yeah, good for you. But see, okay, that's a good point though. This is, when some of you have asked me when we were in Revelation, and some of you asked me when we were in 1 Corinthians, well, Pastor, how in the world are we supposed to really stand up for our faith when people come at us nowadays? When in America, for the longest time, if you were a Christian, nobody would come at you. They would say, oh, that's really great that you have a church home and all that stuff. And it's harder, I think, for Christians to stand up in the midst of such a spiritually pluralistic environment because there's nothing left that's riding on your confession. So nobody cares. So, I mean, think about like if your kids or grandkids were to leave the Lutheran confession and join another church, you'd be like, well, at least they're in church. There's nothing left that's riding on the confession. You don't go, well, what are you doing? You were raised Lutheran. I'm going to box your ears. Why are you leaving? Same thing at work. Like you go to work and you say, well, I'm an underwater basket weaving, non-cisgender, non-binary Buddhist. And somebody would say, well, good for you. I'm glad you have a faith that speaks to your needs. You know what I mean? So nothing's left that's riding on the confession. And when nothing is left that's riding on the confession, it does actually become that much more challenging to remain in your confession. I tell people that Lutheran is just a really good way to be a Christian. It's not that we're the only Christians, and it's not that we think we're the only people who are saved, but it is a really good, robust confession of the faith that helps us to frame out what we believe in a way that's organized and makes sense. And it attempts to take a lot of obstacles out of the way of people hearing the gospel. That's worth fighting for. That's worth being faithful to. And that's all I'll say about it, because I'm not brand loyal to the LCMS because I simply grew up in the LCMS or something like that, because I didn't. I just think it's a good confession of the faith, and I think it's worth fighting for. And I think that's a different way to think about it. But yeah, so good for you. I'm spiritually fluid. I am not spiritually fluid. I just sometimes don't live out my faith the way I intended to. I think we call that hypocrisy or sin. You know, pick your poison. But I'm not spiritually fluid. Okay. All right. So we're in Jonah, the rebellious prophet that we can all relate to, and we are going to be looking at scene 4 today. So again, this is after Reed Lessing's research. We said we were going to divide this up into 7 scenes. Last week we were looking at scene 3. That was Jonah's deliverance and prayer. Today, I think someone's got a Bible that talks. Okay. Today we're going to be in scene 4, which is Jonah's second call. So again, the Lord called Jonah and said, go to Nineveh. And he uses 2 Hebrew verbs. He says, kum lech, okay? So arise and go, like arise and go up, go. And instead it says he went down to Joppa, then he went down into the boat, then he went down into the sea, then he went down in the belly of the fish, and then in the belly of the fish, he starts coming back up again. And the fish vomited him out on dry land. And it's at this point that God will issue a second call to Jonah. Okay? So that's where we are today, scene 4, and you're all excited. It's only 3 verses. How much can Pastor go on and on about 3 verses? Oh, watch me. And then yeah. So we're going to talk about the second call. Now this is really odd and bizarre, because in the history of the Bible, at least, there's not another prophet that I can think of ever that needed to have Yahweh issue him more than 1 call. But it's because of Jonah's initial disobedience that God has to reissue the call, because he didn't answer the first one. And he's the only one. This is rare air. Which kind of prophet are you? I'm the only one he ever had to say it to twice. Okay? Now, how many of y'all have ever said this to your children, or you had it said to you by a parent? Don't make me have to tell you twice. Anybody? Jonah's that kid. Okay? He's that kid. God had to tell him twice. So let's read it, and then we'll go back and we'll make comment. So just the first 3 verses of chapter 3. And I'm using an English Standard Version translation. Then the word of the Lord, and that's in all caps. So what name is that? Yahweh. So then the word of Yahweh came to Jonah the second time, saying, Kum, right? Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city. So Kum Lake, so arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh, according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, 3 days' journey in breadth. And we'll talk about that. Okay? So that's all we're doing today. Just this call and his answer. So this call comes, and there's a couple of problems. Number one, there's a problem in translation, and so we'll have to address that today. And number 2, there's a problem not just with what the text says. There's actually a problem with what it doesn't say. So here we go. There's Jonah looking surprised, and I would be too. And this is his second call. Now, sometimes it's just as important to notice what the Bible does not say as it is to notice what it says. So I'll give you an example from another story. In your Old Testament, you have the creation of the world, and then God makes Adam, and then from Adam's rib, he makes Eve. And it says that for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, and the two will become one, what? Flesh. What does it never say? It says that husband and wife are one flesh. It does not say they are one soul. So then when you get to the New Testament, and Paul, who's this staunch teacher of the gospel, and he's got a question from a congregation about what about marriages between a believer and an unbeliever? And you might have expected Paul to give what you might consider a super conservative answer. Oh, never. Don't ever have a marriage between a believer and an unbeliever. Please don't ever do that. Instead, Paul's like, well, are they willing to live together? And is the unbeliever in the way of the believer's faith, or they encourage them to go ahead and meet with the brothers and sisters in church and practice their faith and do their thing? Well, yeah, Paul, they do all that. Great, Mazel tov. Because, he was Jewish. So, I mean, does that make sense? Like, he's not worried about it because the two are one flesh, they're not one soul. Your conscience is your own. Stop putting that on your partner like they're responsible for your conscience, your morality, your spirituality. They're just simply not. You're responsible for you, right? That's where it's at. And so that's an example of where it's important to not only notice what the Bible says, the two are one flesh, it never says that the two are one soul. Okay? Yes.
I heard once that flesh meant family. They became one family. Is that true?
Maybe by extrapolation you could get there, but really what it means is Jesus picks up on this teaching in the New Testament, and he says, what God has joined together, let not man rend asunder. So marriage is marriage, and that's it. And that's his teaching on it. And it's about the two people. It's not about their kids. And I think that's, even though you could get there by extrapolation, I encourage couples, like if we're in counseling or something, to remember that your responsibility was to your spouse, not to make your kids the center of your world. If you and your spouse are good, the kids will be fine. I mean, they may not be in some ways, but that's not your fault, That's what therapy's for, you know what I mean? Go to therapy and blame your mother, it's fine. Forget the fact that we gave you everything, right? Whatever. Okay. But this is another one of those moments with Jonah's second call. It's just as important to notice what the Bible says, but also what it does not say. So I'll ask y'all, as you look at those first three verses, what is the same in Yahweh's words between Jonah's first call in chapter 1? So you could go say long about chapter 1, verse 2, and his second call here in chapter 3. What's exactly the same? Yeah, the command words are the same, arise and go. Yeah, in both places. And what was that? Evil in the first. Does he make mention of the evil in the second? No. And proclaim what I gave to you. So in the first call, Yahweh makes the focus. Why does he want him to go? Because somebody's been naughty and I want you to go call them to repentance. But in this second call, where's the focus? It's what now? Krista's saying something. What is it? The focus is the message from God that I specifically gave to you. So whereas in the first call, it's almost like it would be kind of like this. Hey, Jonah, so you're my boy, Blue, so get up and go because I need you to do this for me. And then after the disobedience, it's, now Jonah, you and me need to get straight. I gave you my word. And now you're going to go do this because this is now about you and me. Okay? So there's a subtle shift. Okay? There's a subtle shift. This is intimate language. This is I vow. This is you and me. I gave you my word. Get up and go. There's also something different. Y'all pointed it out. He talks about the evil of Nineveh in the first one, not in the second one, and there's a change in the preposition. Yes, we're going to get that nerdy today. But we'll talk about it in a minute. What's not involved in this second call? Not just that, okay, yes, not the evil, yes, if you compare the two texts. Now stop comparing the two texts and just think about what else you think could have been said right now and wasn't. Yeah.
What specifically the message is.
Okay, so we don't know the content of the message. Jonah seems to know it because it's a conversation. This is where you walk in the room and two people are on the telephone and you only hear one half of the conversation. So Yahweh makes mention of the word I gave to you. So Jonah knows what the content of the preaching is. We don't, but Jonah does. And Yahweh knows that Jonah knows what the content of the preaching is, so he's not going to go through it again. I already told you what to go say, and you already know what you're supposed to say. Go get her done, right? What else is not present? I'm going to get a refill on coffee. Is it? Oh, sorry, my back's really out, and I'm really hurting today. I can barely think. If y'all don't like the sermon, tough. Because I'm doing good just to stand up on that pulpit the whole time. Oh, well, thank you. So, you're going to have to think this through a little bit. Think about it from the standpoint of a parent. If you're talking to one of your kids and you told them to do something and then they didn't do it, and you have to come back at it with them again and say, now look, we're going to go over this again because I told you to do this, you're going to do it. What have some of you been tempted to do along with that second call to your child?
Disobey again.
What?
Well, they can't disobey again.
Well, they may disobey again, but what are you tempted to say when you're talking to them a second time? Yeah. Or else. So let me ask y'all. And why? Okay. Well, let's dig deep. Why do you do that? Why do you say the or else? Because at this point you are what? Mad. Disrespected. Another word would be frustrated, right? So you're ticked because you're frustrated. And you're showing your frustration by now threatening and saying, now this is the second time we're going to talk about this, so do it or else. Now let me ask you again, what's not present in Jonah's second call? There's nowhere else. What else is not there? A lot of law. There's no law. There's no. Now you've been disobedient, and I had to get you into the ocean, and then I had to get the fish, and how'd you like that smelly belly? You know what I mean? Like, there's no rehashing of everything you did wrong. And I don't want to, the reason we're only doing 3 verses today is because if you don't get anything else out of this study today, you need to get this. I don't want us to rush over this because if you just read, oh, there's a second call, get up and go, and it says that he wins, and you just move on from there, you plow over this, you're missing the good stuff. Because this is a moment of incredible grace. Second chances. And it's not second chances the way you and I give people second chances. We're like, all right, I'll give you a second chance, but I'm afraid you're going to hurt me again. And we can't stop ourselves from saying it, can we? Well, I'll give you a second chance, but don't lie to me this time. We say to our kids, okay, I'm giving you a second chance, but do it or else. We can't stop ourselves, right? I mean, we can. We don't. But look at the grace of Yahweh. Look at the grace of your God. He doesn't say or else. He doesn't say, now let me rehash why we're here again, giving you a second chance. Nothing. And in fact, he takes Nineveh largely out of the equation by not talking about their evil at all, Because he wants it to be about, now Jonah, I gave you my word. Get up and go. He wants to make it about us. This is about our relationship. Goodness gracious, I'm getting goosebumps. This is about our relationship, Jonah. Buddy, I gave you my word. And when you think about it, what kind of a gift is that? You know, the sailors convert because they hear Jonah preach before they throw him overboard, right? And then they sacrifice to Yahweh. They convert because Jonah preached. But did they have Yahweh's word intimately in themselves?
No.
They're going through everyday life, working this job on this ship, which, by the way, doesn't sound bad to me. Anybody else like sailing? But anyway, doesn't sound bad to me at all. They're working this job on this ship, but they're largely without God in the world. They don't know who God is. Now they know who God is, and they start worshiping him. But they don't have his word in their heart. Somebody's got to give them the answers. So Yahweh comes to Jonah. He's like, now you're going to preach the word that I gave you. I gave you my word, buddy. It's me and you. I gave you my word. I gave you what so many people don't have. This isn't about their evil at this point. You're still going to do what I asked you to do. But this is about you and me, buddy. Where's the other time that you hear this kind of intimate language between God and somebody that he has to, well, he doesn't have to call him a second time, but he does have to reinstate him? No, not Abraham or Moses. Peter. Y'all remember that? It was like a Tuesday, right? So he's got some, yeah, and they had the belly of fish, but they got some fish. There's fish involved, and they had that grill going, you know, over the charcoal. You know? Just thinking like, get you some good walleye and just cook it right there on the shore, right? Clean it, cook it right then. Yeah, so it was a Friday, it's fish on Friday. So it was a Friday, and they're sitting there, and it might have been a Friday, because then the irony, hey, do you love me on the same day that like a week ago you were denying me? Ouch. But anyway, so Jesus is talking to Peter and he says, do you love me? And he's like, yeah. And then, do you love me? And then the third time, do you love me? And he's broken hearted. He's like, you know everything. And so he says, feed my sheep, feed my lambs, feed my sheep. He's not going back over it. He's starting from here. And starting from here, the call is the same, it didn't change. Still got to do what I asked you to do. But there's no going back over all the other crap. Incredible bucketfuls of grace. Don't skip over this. Because sometimes I think in our prayers, when we confess our sins to God, what do we spend a lot of time doing? Or am I the only one that does this? Doing a lot of rehashing, doing a lot of, well, then there was this, and then there was this, and then there was this, and I'm sorry for that, and this is what, blah, 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 blah. And really, God's ready to say, now I gave you my word. Let's get back going to where we said we were going. Let's go in this direction. He's more ready to say, let's get up and go in this direction than he is to talk about everything that already happened. And he's shown this over and over in both the Old Testament and the New Testament when Jesus is reinstating Peter. He doesn't go back over the courtyard. We're not talking about that, Peter. What we're talking about is you and me. Where are we at? And where are you going now? Now you're going to feed my lambs, you're going to feed my sheep. And then Jesus goes on to say, let me tell you what's going to happen to you. You're going to die a martyr's death, and I'm telling you now. And if you remember, Jesus already said that to Peter before he denied him. Peter, Satan's asked to sift you. I've prayed for you so that after you turn it back, he's already got the whole thing mapped out. Your pastor did not tell you to go and sin. Did you hear that? Caveat. Your pastor did not tell you to go and sin. But whether you're talking about Jonah and God already knew he was going to run, His name is Dove, right? Like a flighty dove. Oh, my little flighty dove. Right? I knew you were going to do it. You're a squirrel. I love you. You're my squirrel, but you're a squirrel, right? Or whether you're talking about Jesus in the New Testament, talking to Peter, Peter, this is already what's going to happen. And then after you turn back, strengthen your brothers. You're passionate enough to go sin. And yet, isn't it amazing when you think about it for 2 seconds that even when you're walking in disobedience, God already had a provision for you to bring you home. And we talked about it. Steve was the first one, I think, to say, the problem with the storm is that this isn't meant to kill anybody. Jonah already knows this isn't a storm meant to kill anybody. But he also knows it's his fault. That even when you're walking in obedience, God's made a gracious provision to bring you back home. I didn't tell you to go sin. Don't make him chase you down all day. I had well, I've talked to you all about it before. She passed away now, Megan. Gal that I served in Memphis, and she was an addict until the end when she got clean, thank God. And she lived the rest of her life serving her Lord. But for a while, she'd disappear on her family, her kid, and everything else, and you had to go find her. And one day she said, Pastor, why do you do all this? And I said, well, I love you, but you're making it awfully difficult. Because my job is to be your shepherd, because you're Jesus' sheep. That's the metaphor we use in the church. And I said, so my job is to be a shepherd and to go find you. But you make it awfully hard, and you make me waste hours tracking you down. If you would just please stay in one place where I can find you, it would be a lot easier, She didn't, but we talked about it. It was a good talk for us, so we had a good talk about it. But don't miss that. This is an incredible amount of grace, and it's in what God doesn't say. I call this one, let's not make too much out of a preposition, but still, we're going to notice a preposition. So in both Jonah 1 and Jonah 3, you have it probably in your translation as arise, go to Nineveh, and was it call out against it? Do you have it the same way in both? Look at your text. So it's call out against them both times. The problem is it's not really in Hebrew. It can be translated as against, which is why they just keep it. But it's not actually the same preposition. So in Jonah 1:2, the Hebrew preposition is al. And I gave it to you there. And al is against or towards. But in Jonah 3:2, Yahweh already, y'all have noticed he didn't make mention of the evil of Nineveh, and he changed his preposition. He changed it to el, which is call out to them. So already Yahweh may be hinting what his ultimate goal for the Ninevites is. It's different if you say call out against them versus call out to them, right? So already Yahweh's kind of given a hint that maybe what he wants to happen with Nineveh isn't what Jonah would like to have happen with Nineveh. He'd like to see them punished. Right? Okay. So here's a fun thought experiment. Why does Jonah obey this time? Oh, wait. And we have to talk about not only how far it is from Jerusalem to Nineveh, but also this talk about 3 days journey. That Nineveh is a great city, that it's a 3 days journey across it. And this is one of those places in the story, in the text, where people balk. They say, well, this can't be a true story because we know from ancient archaeological digs and stuff like this, we know that Nineveh, it didn't take you 3 days to walk across it because no city in the ancient world was that big. But if you remember from our introductory class on Jonah, I told you that Jonah was part of a tri-city like triangle Y'all don't remember this. You just look at me and eat your donut while it's kind of like peanuts. It's okay. I'll cry myself to sleep on my pillow later, but it's okay. It's all right. But anyway, in my introductory comments, I told y'all that Nineveh was part of a 3-city like triangle. So think of like the Research Triangle in Carolina or something like that. That's a Southern reference. Y'all probably don't know what I'm talking about. But anyway, or think of like twin cities like Minneapolis, St. Paul, or think of like the Dallas Metroplex, something like that. So in other words, Nineveh was part of a larger district of 3 cities. So you could say Nineveh meaning just Nineveh, the city limits, or you could say Nineveh meaning all 3 cities. Everybody with me? Which means it would have taken you 3 days to walk across it because it was a triangle. Okay? So again, when some people that you meet, just so that y'all know, they're just ready to try to catch the Bible and try to make it like it's not real or it doesn't make sense or it's false or they're just ready. I don't know what their problem is. It seems like there's a lot of other things you could have done today, like play golf. But some people, you meet them and they're just ready to try to tell you why the Bible's wrong. It's not wrong. Nineveh was a part of a triangle district of 3 cities, and it would have taken you 3 days to walk across it. So everybody calm down. Bible's true, okay?
I have a question about the rest of verse 2.
Okay, what about the rest of verse 2?
Well, it says, and taught a message that I told you. Isn't it a message that I told you?
It is. It's what he already gave in. Yeah.
That confused me.
Yeah.
In the NIV, it says, message I give you. Okay.
He refreshed it.
Yeah, so here's the problem. And this is really nerdy for a second, but it's also the answer to your question. The problem when translating Hebrew is that Hebrew doesn't have past, present, and future like we have. They have a completed action and a not yet completed action. And so when God talks to people in the Old Testament, it's often a whole lot of verbs that are in the already completed action. So like when God tells Abram, I'm going to make your offspring, like it comes out in English like it's a future tense, like I'm gonna do this. But when God's talking to Abram, he's saying, I'm gonna do this, and yet it's already as good as completed. So when God gives you a promise, the rule of thumb in Hebrew is take it to the bank. Check's not gonna bounce. But in English, we're left hanging like, when is God actually going to show up and complete what he said he was going to do? It's already a done deal, and everything is already a done deal in Christ. But linguistically, it's easier to get there if you speak Hebrew. It's not your fault, Gentile. It's not your fault you don't speak Hebrew. Okay, so. All right. It is 500 miles from Jerusalem to Nineveh. Anybody want to sing Scottish pop music? I would walk 500 miles? No? Nobody? Okay. It's 500 miles from Jerusalem to Nineveh. It's going to take a month or more to walk there. Okay? Because we're walking, because we're in a caravan. Because now instead of being on a ship, now you got to hook up with a caravan and go with a bunch of people, and there's lots of different reasons why they're traveling between the 2 places. Some people for business, trade, whatever. So this is now going to be like when you're on the airplane, and you're like, turn to the person next to you, if you're that guy. I'm the guy that you turn to that I don't want you to talk to me. And you're like, well, what do you do? And then I'm tempted to make up something like, I sell plastic shower curtain rings, you know, like that old John Candy movie, you know, like, I sell paper clips, you know what I mean? Oh, that's interesting. Oh, really? We're going to go there. You want to talk about the weather next? Like, I love you if you're that person, but good Lord, do I not want to sit next to you? You know, that's on a plane. I don't want to talk to you about that. But anyway, so you're either that guy or you're suffering with that guy. But either way, it's a caravan and everybody's going for different reasons, and you got to hook up with a caravan, and then it's a bunch of you going at the same time because of safety against banditos, right? Los banditos on the highways and stuff. So you got camels and donkeys and stuff, and you got a bunch of people, and you're walking. You have to walk 500 miles. So it's going to take you a month to get there like this, okay? So this is a big deal. Get up and go is not just get up and go. It's get up and this is a commitment. So the question that I want us to ask today is, why then does Jonah obey this time? I've given us a couple of possible answers that we can consider. Do you think he simply realizes that he cannot escape Yahweh? I mean, there he is on the beach looking pretty like, dude, whoa, right? So maybe he just simply realizes he cannot escape Yahweh. What do y'all think about that answer? Is that the reason to go?
The Bible says he learned his lesson.
Okay, well, that would go along with he cannot escape Yahweh. So your study Bible thinks that it's because he learned his lesson and he just realizes, well, I can't escape Yahweh anyway, so I'll just go. Yeah, previously. But remember, he was in the belly of the fish and he prayed that song. Anybody remember the song from last week? That song, we asked ourselves, does that song sound like someone who does have great faith or someone who does not have great faith? And y'all agreed that it sounded like someone who does have great faith. And then we marveled at the fact that Jonah can have this great faith and still be disobedient. And then when somebody brought that up, I asked you if you thought Jonah was alone in that, and then everybody started laughing. Because you can have great faith and still be disobedient too. It's just human nature. It's not weird. You know, it's just human nature. So do you think he just learned his lesson and simply realizes that he cannot escape Yahweh? Put it in the context of the whole thing that we've read up to now, including the psalm. Do you think that's the best answer?
No.
Why not? Yeah, maybe he recognized the grace he received, you know? That's a possibility.
He doesn't want to see anybody get hurt.
He don't want to see anybody else get hurt through his disobedience. Yep. He had an in-depth experience. Oh, near-death experience. It was both. It was deep, all right. And it was also near death. Yeah, I mean, that's a spiritual sidekick to the head, isn't it? Like when you have something that big happen to you. So I know why people like the editors of your study Bible put stuff like that in there. Like, he learned his lesson, but what are they doing with this second call? They're doing what we do to our kids or what we do to each other. Well, I hope you learned your lesson this time. And again, we pointed out that Yahweh isn't talking to him this way. So maybe it's not time. Wouldn't God know how to talk to you the right way? So maybe it's not, if God himself doesn't talk to him this way, maybe it's time for us to back off. Sometimes we want to get on to Jonah and we want to make it about his disobedience. I think sometimes because if you're like me, you get insecure about your own disobedience. And you spend your time trying not to fall into disobedience again. So you give yourself a lot of the pep talk of the law. Well, I hope I learned my lesson this time, you know, that kind of thing. What about a second possibility that some people have said? Maybe he still hopes that Yahweh will punish the Ninevites. Oh, I'll go because maybe you'll still get them. It depends on what kind of time of day it is. Okay. Yeah. Well, let's talk about the third option. Does he have renewed faith after he's been drowned and resurrected in a sort of baptism? Steve says no. Why say no, Steve?
He's always had faith.
Okay.
It's not renewed in any way. I don't even think it's even stronger. It's just, his faith has always been there. He's just a rebellious little rat. I mean, that's what it is.
Okay.
I think you got a recommitment factor of like, dang, I messed up. Like you have that, like that confession of, oh my goodness, like but I wanted to, like desire to do what God's calling you to do. So it could be that renewed is that recommitment.
So Steve says no, because he always had faith. Kira says, but it could be a recommitment factor. Like you say, oh, well, I messed up and now I'm recommitting to what it is God's called me to do. When we talk about walking in our baptism as Christians, do we talk about walking in our baptism like every day you get rebaptized? How do you practice your baptism daily as a Christian? And what does that mean, remembrance? It's 2 words. Now I'm going to go home and cry my sleep. We do it in church. Confession and absolution. You're not supposed to wait till Sunday, people. It's every day, and then when you come together, we'll do it corporately. We'll do it as a group. But confession and absolution is every day of your life. That's how you walk in baptism. God, I did it again. Sorry. Help me to follow you today. Because all I got's today. You know? This is why addicts are my tribe. I love addicts. There's some weird things to say. Addicts are my favorite. Because at some point when they get clean, they recognize that it's just about today. It's not about tomorrow. It's not about the day after that. We just got to live clean today. And it's a recommitment, a daily recommitment to today. Right? And so I hear what you're saying, Steve, and I agree with you. He's being a spoiled brat. He was the megachurch pastor. I mean, he had a sweet paycheck. He had a sweet ride. You know? So give him a little bit of slack. He went from the king's court to the belly of a fish. So, I mean, I know it's his fault and all, but still, that's quite a fault. And now he's going and preaching to the enemy. But look, y'all, I'll tell you what I think it is, because we haven't really talked about this the whole time. I always do this. I give you some point, like at the end when you're thinking about having to go get your kids. But just if you can stay with me for 2 seconds. Who's the hero of the story? God's the hero of the story, not Jonah. Even though the book says Jonah, it's really not about Jonah. I mean, it is, but it's not. God's the hero of the story. So here's what I want to believe. There's not really a right answer to this. It's just whether or not you think your answer is a good answer. Here's my good answer. This is what I want to believe. I want to believe, yes, Steve, that he always had faith, because he knows exactly who Yahweh is. That's what bothers him. It bothers him that Yahweh is this gracious and that he might spare the Ninevites. But he also experiences disobedience in his walk with God. And sometimes we do need a spiritual roundhouse kick to the head. Yeah, we need a Godsmack to say, hey, wake up. What you're doing isn't what I've called you to. And what I want to believe is that this is a sort of baptism. This is a sort of going down. It's at least a prototype for baptism. It at least foreshadows baptism for you and me. And there is a going down and a coming up. And there is a coming up to newness of life, to walk in newness of life, and to walk in the good works to which I've called you. And I want to believe that he's going to bother to go, maybe for all 3 reasons. Because I agree with Wade. It depends on what time of day it is. I might schwaffle between different positions. In 1 second, I might be thinking to myself about, well, I can't escape it anyway. That's a bad attitude. So then maybe I go back to, well, but he did save me. So now maybe I'm obeying because I'm thankful. But then maybe somewhere along the way, because remember, we got a month to think about this, right, before we get there. Maybe somewhere along the way, I'm also kind of going with the position of, I don't know, maybe he'll whack them. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Then I could preach against them and watch fire come down out of heaven. And then maybe I say to myself, oh, well, but that's not really who Yahweh is. So he'll probably just save them. But I can't get out of it anyway. Oh, but then he did save me too. So I guess I'm glad he saves people. You might kind of get, like, you got a month to think about this. You might go back and forth between all 3 positions. It might not have to be just one. But I want us to recognize today that God has been ridiculously merciful to Jonah, and that Jonah isn't going a second time under the law. He is still going a second time under God's grace and mercy. And isn't that wonderful?
Maybe that's the message from them.
That's not the message that nice. We'll get to that. Because he does actually end up preaching, and we do hear at least a snippet of the sermon. It's not the whole sermon, it's a snippet of the sermon. But, and it may even be a summation. My thinking is that it's a summing up, but don't
you also think that as he goes through each of those, like we all do at different times, that he would also go back to what was said in these verses, because he knows what we don't know what God told him, but he knows what God's sending him to do.
well, he knows what God told him to say, but when we get to what he says, it's a double entendre. So
right, but I'm just talking about like this part,
yeah,
where even though you go through like these steps, like you're saying,
yeah,
that like you say, you had 30 days to walk and think.
and think about it.
There's certain,
Yeah.
I know with me, God smacks me all the time.
Yeah,
But hey,
yeah,
remember what I told you.
right. And that's what he has to go back to is that remembrance of that conversation.
Right.
And once God has talked to you, you know he's talked to you.
Oh, yeah.
And you go back to that conversation over and over and over again. You replay it. Because when we talk about what it means to live in faith, sometimes that's all you've got is what God told you. You don't have your circumstances. You don't have anything you can look at on the outside. You only have what he told you, and you're almost hoping against hope. And Paul said something about that in Romans chapter 5. Right? So, all right, I love you. Jesus loves you. See you in church, or if I already saw you in church, go walk in God's grace, and I'll see you next week.